Hello everybody, welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm José.
I'm Mike.
And today we're going to be discussing The Incredibles 2, which you've just come from.
Yes. Well, you've just come from bloody Italy and Slovenia and all over the shop.
I have.
Where have you been all week?
I've been seeing movies and castles and...
Oh, what'd you see?
We saw this Hungarian film about two people who meet in their dreams as deer. And we saw this in the middle of Ljubljana's castle at the top, which was just like wonderful. I love those open air screenings.
Do you remember what it was called, the film?
I'm afraid I don't, actually.
Oh, okay.
But it's one of the art house films that have had a success everywhere this year. I don't think it's come to Birmingham, though. So, you know, it's a film about a girl who's got... she's a little bit like the woman in the bridge. What's the word when you're fixated on one thing?
Obsessive.
She's not only obsessive, but she's got problems processing emotions.
Autistic.
Yeah, she's a little bit on the scale.
Yeah.
And basically, you know, she falls in love with this guy who works at a meat processing plant.
As you do.
So the film begins with this great amount of, not violence to animals, I suppose, but, you know, showing what happens in an abattoir. Yes.
Yes.
And it's kind of quite brutal that way. And then the whole thing is about, you know, these people who, you know, through the puzzlement of everyone, meet in their dreams, and they meet in their dreams as deer. They have exactly the same dreams, right? So the film is about beginning to recognize that aspect of it, and in doing so, kind of recognize themselves and what they want and so on. I liked it very much.
Sounds like your sort of thing.
Well, your sort of thing is clearly The Incredibles.
We both had a good time. It's been 14 years since the last Incredible.
Has it?
It's one of these that people kind of thought for a while, is it going to have a sequel, is it not going to have a sequel, what's going to happen? Same with Monsters, Inc. When Monster University eventually came out, it was quite a while since Monsters, Inc. And Monster University was good. I mean, I like that film. I think it got a little bit of a tough reception, but I thought it was decent. This film is like 90% brilliant good fun.
Yes.
And 10% incredibly boring.
Yes. I didn't find it boring, but I must say, until the baby arrived, I thought, oh, this is going to be quite an exceptional, you know. So as soon as the baby arrived into the picture, it kind of lifted everything. All the gags with the baby, I thought were just absolutely fantastic.
The baby is the absolute highlight.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So the basic idea of The Incredibles 2 is, if you're not familiar with The Incredibles at all, the 2004 original Incredibles was a Pixar movie about a couple who are superheroes, Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, and they're sort of superhero friends, and they've got a family as well. The kids have got superpowers, and superheroes are not liked by society. They cause too much damage, but you know they kind of when a supervillain comes along, they have to team up and fight it and win, and sort of win the country's hearts back, and also become a family and all that sort of stuff. This film weirdly starts off in basically the same place that the last film started off, which is superheroes are illegal, no one likes them, and they cause too much damage. And again, it's the same thing. They have to win their place back in society, sort of thing. It's kind of weird that it starts off in the same place.
Yes. I didn't mind that, and I thought there were aspects of that I found quite interesting. So, for example, I found it interesting that when the family becomes unemployed, when they shut their unit down, they go live in a motel. And, you know, so kind of there are all of these films, like the Florida Project and so on, that kind of, in which motel living has become a kind of a symbol for contemporary America in some way. So I thought it was interesting that the film kind of touched on that, really. And the film is also interesting in the way that it's working through debates about gender and the family and men's role and women's role, and you know, I don't think it does anything particularly interesting.
It's not exactly revolutionary about it, but it has a just kind of overall progressive bent to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Which is kind of nice to see.
It is nice to see. But really, there were three things that I thought to me were just like exceptional, that kind of, you know, put the film onto a different level. First was the baby, and all the gags with the baby. They were brilliant. You know, I just love that. The second thing was the interval, the tiny brief interval with Edna Mode, who was my favorite character of the first film. You know, she appears very briefly, and really to design a costume for the baby, and then, you know, becomes like...
Yeah, she's a kind of superhero fashionista who designs all their costumes.
That's right.
And gives them all... She's like Q, rather.
Yeah.
Gives them all the gadgets and stuff as well.
But she's a very camp Q. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's just brilliant. And it's brilliant once again, and sadly too brief, you know, though that was a little jewel of a moment, really. And the other thing that seemed really exceptional to me was the way that the villainous was visualized. I just loved the look of that.
As in the way she was dressed, the way she moved?
Well, the way that she looked with those cheekbones and the big eyes, and you know, and also the kind of... She looks like a kind of a disaffected punk teenager. So, yeah, she's got a kind of a look of ennui about her.
Yeah, the way she kind of hangs off chairs and that sort of thing. You notice it.
Yeah, I loved all of that about that character, actually. I thought that was smashing.
I really picked up on the animation, basically. I mean, it's something that we never really talk about with Pixar because they've become... They are so established as the best at making animated movies that... I think it actually doesn't get enough attention. The animation and the visual design and the rendering of the film's like literally technically, it's fucking amazing. And there's facial and kind of bodily animation in this film, which if it was live action, you'd say it was been kind of overdone. But it makes sense in a cartoony context, and it expresses people's emotions very, very vividly. I can't think of kind of like good examples of it, but you just notice it all over. Like people respond to each other in very emotive ways.
Yeah, you loved all the animation of the motorcycle ride.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah,
and also it's kind of full of ideas as well. So the motorcycle chase, the motorcycle that Elastigirl gets splits in two, the front half and the back half, and then she keeps the two connected using her body to as a sort of springy sort of thing. And she comes up with it gives her lots of things to do with kind of swinging around and using momentum to get herself into various places. It's brilliant. It's really full of ideas. The action sequences are just brilliant, I think, all throughout. I don't think there's a single one that is a bum note. Maybe there's a couple of fights which are just a bit punchy, but even then they're still full of ideas with people using their powers in creative ways.
Yes. What are your problems with it? What do you think didn't...
What I felt was... So the premise of this film is that superheroes are not liked by society, and they're illegal, and they cause too much damage, and they make more problems than they solve. And there's this one sort of rich guy who loves superheroes and has ever since he was a kid, and he wants to help get superheroes back on the map and get them legal again. So he kind of says, let's work on a plan to get you back on Cybase, and that's the guy whose sister you mentioned earlier is the girl you like the look of. Now that the sister is great, she's kind of interesting, but the guy is just a total non-entity. He's a drip, and not only that, but when he's introducing himself and his kind of plan and his background, it's a good 5 minutes of just talking with nothing interesting happening, certainly not visually, and it's just talk, and it's dead, and it's just information coming out. It's not exactly exposition, but it is exposition. It's trying to do a little bit of other stuff, but it is basically, this is just exposition, getting the background out there, and it's for people who are such economical, interesting, creative filmmakers as Pixar. That is really disappointing.
He's a problematic character, I think, because, on the one hand, he's kind of meant to be a good guy, right? So there's this opposition between him and his sister, really, that the film plays off of. So, they're kind of meant to be equal opposites in a way, But the film is very critical of what he represents in a way. He's like this high-flying capitalist, who likes to have everybody on side and, kind of make everybody good, but towards his own ends. And his own ends are all about making money and commercializing things, right? His whole thing
the sister makes the point that he's the salesman and she's the creative.
The creative person, right? So, and there is kind of like an implied criticism throughout, but it's never pushed. I mean, ultimately, he's meant to be like a good guy, right?
Yeah.
So, I thought that was like fudging the character, really. I thought the background that they gave for the motivation to both of the characters, that the parents got killed, one blames the belief in superheroes, the other one blames the fact that superheroes were not available to rescue the parents. I thought that was all kind of a bit by numbers, really, and dull.
Yeah, that's how I would put it. It's sort of not creative enough, really.
Yes. I also had a problem with, what's his name, Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Cool, Mr. Freeze.
Cool,
yes,
Mr.
no wonder.
Freeze,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Get Samuel L. Jackson in, and
Yeah.
the black guy has to be Mr. Cool.
Yeah. I didn't like that. I also thought that it was one of those insertions into a film just to have racial representation, but that, it's not rendered in an interesting way. And he's almost like, he's given things to do, babysit the kids or come in for the kids or...
Yeah, he's a friend to the family.
Yeah, but it actually is one of those things that I think is meant to compensate for racial representation. So it comes from a good place. It's to add on something, but that actually fundamentally reveals the problem with racial representation in American cinema, that it is just an add-on. It is a subsidiary add-on character. So, and I think
of course, he was in the first one. I don't know if you are forgetting that he was in the first film. So there's an element of just he's there because he was there before.
Yeah, but in that case, they could have.
I agree. There is a moment
there
is a moment in this film with him very early on where it's the very opening fight of the film with the Underminer, where they fight the Underminer and then they all run off because they're not supposed to be fighting crime; it's illegal. And the Incredibles family get taken in and questioned and talked to by the police, the FBI, or whoever. Whereas Mr. Freeze runs off, and when he meets up with them again later at the motel, he says, "I knew that they wouldn't do anything to you, but I had to go." And it was really subtle, but there is a moment in there of just like, what the fuck could have happened to me? If the police had got hold of me.
Well, that's true. There is that element.
It's one moment, though.
Yeah, and they try to do other things. So when he leaves the house and the wife is like, "Where are you going?" and that kind of way of speaking.
Again, that's from the first film.
Yeah. But I kind of.
That's more callback humor, really.
Yeah, I wasn't too.
No, he's not.
It felt very cliched, really. So, but anyway, that's really kind of picking at flaws, right? Because the film is hugely entertaining. It's very, very well done. I'm not at all surprised that it's become such a huge hit.
So there's a central kind of thing in the film where there's a tension between Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl, who are the married couple, who Mr. Incredible wants to be a superhero and he loves that life. And this was again from the first film. This was basically the same theme that's coming back. He loves that life and he wants to be a superhero. And Elastigirl is much more realistic and says, "This is the law, and we have to obey the law, and we've got a family to take care of," and such and such. And then they get split up, where Elastigirl is chosen by the businessman to be the face of new superheroes because she's responsible and she doesn't cause all the damage that Mr. Incredible does.
They've done a study on them.
Yeah. Cost-benefit analysis.
Yes.
That he causes more damage than
she does.
Well, than he solves. She goes off to pursue this sort of being the face of superheroes. And he is stuck at home looking after the family. He's not really allowed to, and it's done in this way of saying, I'm doing this for the family, so we'll eventually all be able to be superheroes again. But of course, he's stuck in this position where he is jealous of his wife.
Yes.
And it's really interesting. And it's really interesting kind of running. It's like what we were saying about there being a kind of progressive bent to the film. This is where it comes in heavily. Talking about sort of. It's not really about roles in the family, but it's about sort of positions. It's like a hierarchy in the family. He basically feels should be the head of the family.
Yes.
And that's represented by being the king superhero.
Yes.
And he's not allowed to be.
And also, and
then he takes on the womanly role, essentially, of looking after the family, doing the homework with the kids, that sort of stuff.
Yes, which he claims to understand and value, but then, realizes the extent of what's involved only through experiencing it, which is all very nice, but it's also all very it's all
sure,
cliche.
but I think it's well done.
It's very well done.
I'm not saying every moment has to be original. I think it can be observations just really well sort of put together, and so I really loved everything that was him with the family, trying to look after them and not being able really to cope, and getting stubble and not being able to sleep, because it's not done in a way of going like, I didn't realise how hard my wife's life was. It's not doing that. It's just saying, holy fucking shit, I'm having an awful time doing something that I'm not used to, and then it's like, it's not only is his life incredibly hard looking after 3 kids and trying to keep their lives together, but also he's dealing with this jealousy. There's this kind of really complex aspect to it I really enjoyed, whereas the side of that you see of Elastigirl, where she's working with the business guy to promote good superhero-dom, is not that interesting. The action sequences she gets into are really good, but the conversations that surround her side of the story are not that interesting.
No.
She has a couple of conversations with the sister that are this kind of... There are these weird kind of like sisterly talks of like, what our places are and who we should be, and our places in relation to the men in our lives. They have that aspect to them, but it's not. It's almost like those scenes are deliberately there to beat the Bechdel test. But they just don't really do anything for me.
Well, I also felt a slight twinge when the villain of the film is revealed to be the woman. I also...
What was the twinge for you?
Well, because to me that the and I forget her name now, but the sister was such an interesting character and so beautifully visualized, and really just so interesting, right? Like kind of this genius who can invent all of these things, and who's kind of slightly sour and disaffected with life, and who's trying to find a role for herself vis-a-vis her brother, who's the public face of the company and so on. And so to make such an interesting character then become the villain, it's almost like...
But were you surprised when she was the villain? I thought it was obvious from the start.
I wasn't surprised, but I think they could have done something so much more interesting had that actually character been the same way, charismatic, intelligent, interesting, beautiful, but disaffected. And then given the villainy to somebody else. Like, it's almost as if you have to be a genius woman. You can only be it if you're the villain, right? Like,
yeah, I see what you mean. I didn't have a problem with that, really. It made sense that she was smart enough to have that plan and as you say, sort of disaffected and had enough trauma in her life that she would want to carry it out.
The character made sense. It's just, kind of, it's just an observation.
No, I know what you mean.
I
thought it was more interesting the fact that she and her brother weren't in it together. Weirdly, I kind of expected them to be. Especially because he was such a tool. Because he was so just nice and happy to be around all these superheroes. He thought, this guy's up to something.
Yes.
And the fact that he turns out to genuinely be that guy.
Yes.
It's pretty lame. I wanted more from him.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think those are things that the film hasn't worked out. I was very disappointed in Elastigirl because. I think Holly Hunter is so great, and there's just something about her voice, that I just adore. Like, there's a huskiness in the way she pronounces, anyway, I just love her. And actually, it's a weird thing that she is the protagonist, and she is given all of this stuff to do, and she's got all these action scenes, and yet...
The character's a bit
dull.
of nothing.
Yeah.
Because her character, essentially, is not the one going through any real... troubles or changes.
That's right.
Like her thing is basically, I want to play by the rules, but I'm offered the chance to break the law for the purpose of making superheroes accepted again and become this kind of star. But it's not something that really plays with it. It's not something, she doesn't get obsessed by this stardom or anything like that.
I think
she just handles it really well. And whereas like I say, Mr. Incredible doesn't handle his side of it well at all, and that's what's really interesting.
I think that's a very interesting observation, really, because. You in some ways you think that the hero of the film is Elastigirl, but really it's Mr. Invincible or Mr. Incredible. Because he is the one. Sorry?
For coping, you mean?
Well, he's the one who goes through all the changes, whose character changes completely, from the beginning to the end. So, the film is really, it's about the family, but actually it is about him, even though, it's Miss Incredible or Mrs. Incredible,
Elastigirl,
who kind of gets all the action. So very interesting. I have to think about that some more.
But it is a. I mean, I would say it's an ensemble thing, really. I wouldn't have put it down as this is the centre of the film or that's the centre of the film exactly in terms of characters. I would, I think it is an ensemble thing. It's about how they kind of learn their various lessons, come back together. But it is, I think, undeniable that Mr. Incredible's side of it happens to be more interesting than Elastigirl's.
It's about the
family. It could have been made more interesting, Elastigirl's.
Yes.
As I say, if she hadn't coped with it, if she got a bit big-headed and that sort of thing, which might have been cliche. I'm not saying like I've got the perfect answer. That's the kind of, I guess, the wrinkle you would expect there to be. Nonetheless, it would have made it more interesting than the fact that she was just on the job and getting everything right.
Yes.
Anyway,
it's about the family. Each one is given their bit. The bit that I found the most annoying was the teenage girl on a date bit. I thought that was really cliched. But every other character, and actually all of it, and if you think about it, was cliche. So, the teenage girl is living through all these teenage problems about going on a date and the ramifications of all of that. The young boy is like madly obsessed with a car, and he finds the remote control for the, his father's car that's been impounded and sold off, and so I think
well, I remember. I mean, that's
very
true.
Stereotypical.
It's true, but I remember Trey Parker from South Park was talking a while ago about the way he structures his plots when he writes South Park, and he was talking about Pixar and essentially saying like Pixar, from the first 5 minutes of a Pixar film exactly what's going to happen. Who's going to do this and who's going to do that and who's going to go good and who's going to go bad and how the relationship's going to go. Everything, but the ride on the way there is fantastically enjoyable.
Well, I think that's true of this one.
I think that's certainly true of this one.
Yeah.
There's so much creativity within the scenes.
I'd love to see all the gags with the baby again.
Yeah, you just want like a supercut of the baby stuff, especially where Edna falls in love with the baby.
I love
that's a whole beautiful section, and it's also really great filmmaking, like the way that the camera is used. Yeah. These shots when the baby is kind of discovering his superpowers in the back garden fighting the raccoon.
Oh, that was great.
And he's sort of the raccoon is having a really weird time with him, and he's sort of shooting lasers, and then he's going invisible, and then he's doing this, doing that. And the raccoon, there's a load of deck chairs in between them, like recliners, and the raccoon's hiding behind one at the very end, and you see it from his sort of point of view, or his perspective, all the way to the other end of them, and the baby's there, tiny, just on his own in the frame, teeny tiny, and then just ignites.
Yes, that was wonderful.
Beautiful, and it's the composition and the timing and the animation. It's really, really, really well directed comedy.
Yes. I mean, for me also, it's very well directed comedy, but it's also given a kind of there's a poetry about it, really. So for example, when the baby's taken to Edna Mode for a suit, and also for babysitting, and you can see how they bond, and one of the ways that they bond is visualized for you because the baby develops this haircut and gestures and begins to repeat the actions of Edna Mode, right? And so actually the whole thing is visual, but you just see like there's a connection between these two now, right? Like and it's kind of rendered in that way, which I thought was beautiful actually.
And it's kind of it's kind of what I was saying about the animation being very expressive, but also sort of overdone. It's like there's this contradictory aspect where it's subtle, but also very, very clear, and it's kind of beautiful. It's really, really, really well directed. Apart from those lulls, there are a few. It's a really brilliantly directed film with load of charm.
And for me, I didn't know that Brad Bird
played Edna Mode.
Yeah,
I told you.
Which actually adds an extra special twist to it. I appreciate it even more.
In a queer way, you mean?
That's right. Okay, so shall we wrap it up here?
Is he gay, I wonder, Brad Bird?
I have no idea. But, looking at the film now, you think he must be.
Of course, he made the first one as well. It's his...
Which was very campy, so...
No, he's married to a lady.
Oh, well.
As far as we know. He's a really good director. He directed Ghost Protocol as well, the Mission Impossible one.
Yes.
The latter Mission Impossible has been fantastic.
Yeah. Whether he's married or not, I think him voicing that particular character in that particular way queers it up, you know.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So-
Yeah, no, I wasn't. I didn't mean to go on like a gay witch hunt.
Anyway, let's wrap it up here. So highly recommended. It's a brilliant Pixar film, I think.
Brilliant, fun.
All right.
Lovely.
Thank you very much for listening. We're on SoundCloud, Twitter, Facebook, and we welcome your comments and your feedback.
Certainly. Cheerio.
Bye bye.